So let me start by introducing myself to you, and to explain first and foremost, I'm not a teacher. Never been a teacher. I have raised 3 children now, 17, 20 and 22 years old, so I do have some experience, okay? The early years education was a long time ago for me though, okay? So you're going to wonder who I am, why I'm here, how on earth I can be sharing information to you on design thinking. I run a company called Customer at Heart, which is essentially a customer experience consultancy business, but a lot of the work that I do with organisations, any organisation, is basically to help organisations tap into creativity and innovation. And a lot of the work that I do tends to be as a result of the creativity that as adults we've kind of lost along the way. And there's something very interesting about the early years students and the creativity and innovation that they're able to demonstrate. So that's the background. What I'm going to talk to you about is, well, labour is the design thinking process. Okay, but design thinking, in many respects, it is a particular discipline. There is a particular approach and methodology that's associated with it. Some of the approaches that we use, you might see more related to sort of STEAM into STEM into STEAM type activities. So it's basically about bringing creative process into other subjects, so the science and maths, as well as literacy as well. Okay. So, why am I talking to you about design thinking process, and why is it so important with the early years students? This is a quote from the anthropologist Margaret Mead, and what she said is that children must be taught how to think, not what to think. And the reason that it's so important to help children to explore solutions and problems for themselves is that, particularly for the younger years students, they actually have a phenomenal creative capability, and unfortunately we do tend to lose it a little bit as we get older. If I ask for a show of hands, how many of you would say you are creative? Okay, so less than half. Yeah, so by deduction I would assume that the rest of you consider yourself not creative. Okay, so today's children are going to be solving the problems of tomorrow, okay? The challenges of the world we live in are becoming greater and greater. And the reality is, whereas in the past it was possible to be single discipline in terms of our approach, and we could just be lawyers, or just be scientists, or just be mathematicians, or just be designers, the reality is now that the collaboration that's needed to solve many of the world's problems are enormous, and it's very, very important. A lot of the work that I do with organisations is actually bringing together different mindsets in order to solve problems. Okay? They might not be global issues, but they're organisational issues and organisational challenges. It's also the case that for many of the children today, I mean, for one, you're aware of the fact that many of the jobs that they'll be going into don't even exist today, so that we have that complexity. They'll also potentially, I've seen one statistic that suggests they could change jobs up to 30 times in their life cycle. Now, I mean, myself, I've changed jobs quite a few times, but that's going to be increasingly the case for the children of today. And one of the things that really interests me about the younger students is their innate capability for divergent thinking or creative thinking and innovation. I've got a little test to do on you to see how good your divergent thinking actually is. And I do have an apology to make before I start, because the last group I had in was huge. I think I had about 50 people in the room. So I printed lots and lots of these sheets and I only have a few left. So what I'm going to ask to do is an improvisation, okay? And in order to improvise, the sheets I have, you can take them. If you don't get a sheet, can I just ask you, as we do the activity, it only takes 1 minute, draw circles, okay? You need 30 circles. So as you complete the activity, draw another circle and keep going until you reach 30, okay? So for those of you that want them, these sheets are available. So, there you go. There you go. Front row privilege, because you sat in the front row, okay? what the ladies in the front have on the sheet are 30 circles. Your challenge without a sheet is that you will draw 30 circles. You can do it as you go along. You don't need to do it now. I'm going to give you 1 minute to complete this activity. It's a very simple activity, and all you have to do in the 1 minute time zone that I give you is to turn each and every one of your circles into an object. Now, I'm going to show you an example of what I mean first of all. I'm going to show you on the screen very quickly. It'll be on the screen for a few seconds. Once I remove it, you then start and you start completing your circles. Go. 1 minute starting from now. And stop. Have any of you completed all 30 circles? 20? 16? 16 left. 16 done. Okay. Any of you achieved more than 16? Okay. So I always hate to embarrass people, but I would like to share. I did this activity for Dubai Summer Surprises. And one of the 7-year-olds that I was working with completed all 30 circles in about 40 seconds. How do you think he did it? He didn't join all the circles, but he could do that, yeah? What he did was put the same thing in every single circle, okay? Just put a smiley face in every single one. One of the challenges that we have as we get older is that our minds create creative roadblocks. I will put money on the fact that every single one of you, as you completed that activity, will have created rules for yourself. I didn't give you any rules. And what early year students are good at doing is not creating any rules for themselves. Okay? So when you complete that, often what you say is, can I? Am I allowed to? Should I? I can't do that. Okay? And as soon as we start to think like that, our ability to think creatively becomes limited, okay? Now, because as I've said, and it would be interesting, try this activity with your students, see how well they do. Some will do better than others, okay? But I'd be interested to see as a test how well they approach this. But one thing is for sure, that tests on younger children has demonstrated that they have a very good ability for thinking divergently. So let me take this back 1 second. What I'm going to show you, it's a study based, it was produced back in, or started back in 1968, a gentleman called George Land, and he produced a study for a creativity test for NASA. And the creativity test was in order to bring in engineers and scientists into NASA who could demonstrate good creativity and innovation. The test was particularly useful, it was particularly successful, and he decided that he would use it with children. And he tested, in 1968, he tested 1,600 young children aged 3 to 5. And the test was to identify their ability to think divergently, i.e. to think creatively. It's not exactly the same concept, but it's as close as you're going to get to a creativity test. And at the ages of 3 to 5 years old, 98% of those children were able to demonstrate very strong divergent thinking skills. Okay? The same group of children were measured ages 8 to 10, and by the time they'd reached 8 to 10 years old, their ability to think divergently had already dropped, and only 50% of them were able to show the same capacity. Okay? I'm sure you can work out where this is heading. By the time they reached 13 to 15 years old, only 12% of them could demonstrate divergent thinking. By the time they reached 25 years old, that had dropped to 2%. Okay? Now, there are obviously Sir Ken Robinson, etc. There are suggestions that school actually schools creativity out of children. What I would actually say, and what this study demonstrated, is that non-creative thinking is actually learned. We do learn that over time. And part of that comes through our own ingrained rules that we develop. And a lot of the work that I do with organisations is to unlearn those blockages, okay? And to try and get, what I try and do is to get adults to think like children, yeah? To play, to not be afraid of failure, etc., etc. All of the things that your early years students have in abundance. And the challenge for you as early years teachers is to enable them to embrace that, to use it and apply it, and hold on to it as they move through the school process, okay? So no small feat, because as we suggested, the children you're teaching today, we need them to be able to solve the problems of tomorrow, okay? And while I say I'm not a teacher, but I have raised 3 children. They're not even children anymore. My youngest is 17, I've got a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old as well. And if I look at mine, my kids cover the spectrum. I've got one who's a computer games designer, I've got one who's training to be a lawyer, and I've got a daughter who's just about to start biomedical science. So I've got the complete gambit there. I don't know what happened along the way, why one of them maintained the creativity and one of them's gone the more scientific, analytical route, but you know, there's something, it's nature, nurture, I guess, okay? Another test which demonstrates the capability of early years students to be very creative and very divergent in their thinking is something called the Marshmallow Challenge. Have any of you come across the Marshmallow Challenge before? The Marshmallow Challenge has been used thousands and thousands of times. It's often used within organisations, particularly for team building and collaboration. Okay? Very simple activity. All that is required is that you have 20 sticks of uncooked spaghetti. And it's very important you use the uncooked, not the cooked, because it definitely doesn't work. You need 1 yard of tape or 1 metre of tape, 1 yard of string, and 1 marshmallow. And you have exactly 18 minutes. And in 18 minutes, the challenge is to build the tallest structure or the tallest tower you can. Okay? Now, this test has been conducted, as I say, probably hundreds of thousands of times now. And through all of these tests, one key factor has been identified, and that is that the best people to complete this are kindergarten students. They outperform business graduates, executives, CEOs, every single time. And the reason for that is that their approach is completely different. Every single time, and what I would suggest, it might be an interesting activity for you to conduct this with your colleagues, and then maybe try it with your early year students, yeah? Maybe do a bit of a play-off between the two and see what the results are. But I'll predict the results for you. And one of the reasons that the early year students are particularly good at this is that they start by putting the marshmallow on first. And the ultimate goal is, when the structure is completed, the marshmallow has to be complete, i.e. not broken up, and it has to be at the top of the structure. When adults do this, they build the structure, and then they put the marshmallow on. When children do it, they put the marshmallow on, and then they build. Because again, our brains tell us that it's marshmallow. It's very light, there's no mass to it. Whereas children think differently. They will test the ideas, and they're prepared to test the ideas. Here are some examples of the sorts of things that children do when they build these structures. And one of the things they do also is they're not limited by this concept of building a tower, because some of them will build animals, giraffes and tigers and bears, etc. Okay? So their ability not only to think differently, but also be more creative in their approach is really quite outstanding. Okay? So what I would suggest to you is that the creative adult is the child that survived. So you as early years teachers, your responsibility, from my perspective, is huge. Yeah, no pressure. But I really do think that your responsibility to enable students, young students, not only to recognise their capability, but to value that and to hold on to that and not feel that it's something that they shouldn't do or they will lose along the way. They have to retain it because those skills, they're needed now. Yeah? And 100% they will be needed even more when those early years students actually go into the workforce themselves. Okay? So some of the examples that I'll talk to you about and show you are based on the principles of design thinking. The design thinking has been an emerging topic and an emerging methodology probably over about the last 10 years, but the last 5 years it's just accelerated. It's used increasingly within organisations to solve really difficult and challenging problems. But it's also being used on a global scale to tackle some really challenging global issues. Yeah, everything from pollution, droughts, you name it, it's being used to actually deal with these issues. And the reason for that is built around a principle, the empathize at the very start is something called human nature, human-centred. And the human-centred is that we're basically building solutions for other people based on other people's needs. We need to define the problems, which we can't build solutions unless we understand what it is that we're building and why we're building them, who we're building them for. And then the last 3 parts of the design thinking process, in many respects, this is one of those topics, it really isn't rocket science, but it's such a phenomenally useful approach to take. And that's based around the principle of ideation, i.e. coming up with lots of ideas, yeah, and not thinking, well, that's not possible, we can't do that, we shouldn't do that. Back to the 30 circles, we've got to broaden our thinking, come up with as many ideas as possible, explore those ideas. And the way we explore the ideas is through prototyping. And by prototyping, we build examples. So if we're building an example of a solution, what it means is that whereas ordinarily you might sit and talk about the ideas, and somebody else will tell you that idea is rubbish, and somebody else will give another idea, and you don't get anywhere. With a design thinking approach, you build a physical example of your idea, and then you have something to test. Okay? Very, very simple, very fast, very effective. If we want to dumb that down and bring it down to student level and take that terminology and put it into words that we can understand and apply for kids, what we're essentially talking about is observation, first of all. What is the issue that we're dealing with? What are the things we need to take into consideration? Who are we building this for? What are the challenges we need to overcome? Imagining. Let the imaginations run wild to think about potential solutions that we can put into place. Making. Let's make an example of that. How can we build on that? And then the improvement. So once we've built something, let's test it, let's see what we can do to improve it and make it better. Okay? I believe that the design thinking approach can be applied to pretty much anything. It can be applied in organisations, it can be applied in the classroom. Your challenge is I can give you the principles of what it is. It's your challenge to see how you apply it. And what I hope is after this workshop, you go away and it starts to spark some ideas of different ways that you can use it. But what I will give you are some examples of some of the ways that you can use the approach within the classroom. Okay? The first one, you're all familiar with the story of the gingerbread man? Yeah? It could be the gingerbread man, it could be Billy Goat's Gruff, it could be anything. Any children's story. Because typically, any children's story, there's a particular challenge that has to be overcome within the story. Yeah? Rapunzel letting down her hair, Sleeping Beauty, there's always something that needs to be overcome. Now, as far as the gingerbread man is concerned, he gets made by somebody who wants to be his mother. He runs away, he runs as fast as he can. You can't catch him because he's the gingerbread man. And then he needs to cross a river. And as a result of crossing the river, he gets eaten by the helpful fox who's helping him across the water. Okay? Now, if you were to apply the design thinking process to the gingerbread man's story, the first thing you might do is to get the children to think about the gingerbread man. What are his needs? What's important to him? Well, the gingerbread man can't get wet. That's the whole reason he's getting the lift with the fox. He needs to get across the water safely. So what could be created for the gingerbread man that would help him to get across the water safely? So it might be a boat, but what would happen if you test that boat out? Is it going to tip? Is it going to fall in, etc., etc.? You get the idea? So you'd encourage the children to create the solution that meets the needs of the gingerbread man. You test that solution, using that feedback, you get them to develop a better solution. You build on the ideas and you share with each other, okay? It can be applied to any story, any narrative whatsoever. Another example I'll share with you, I've got links on all of the slides as well. This was a project that was set with first graders to help improve the school for kindergarten students. And it was the first graders that were responsible for developing the empathy with the kindergarten students. They asked them what sort of things they wanted that would make school more fun for them. And out of that, they developed these prototypes. They made the examples. And some of the examples, so you can see there were some games that were made. They decided that they wanted some games to play, so they created a marble run. And once they created it, they could test the ideas out and put it into practice. They also suggested, not surprisingly, because this was kindergarten students, they wanted a candy shop. And through the process of discussion, talking with them and developing the ideas, they said, well, candy shop's not going to work in reality, but let's build a model of the candy shop, and that could be something that could be used during the playtime. Okay? Now that, again, is all based on the design thinking approach and principles, and it's about passing responsibility and giving the authority to the younger students to actually come up with solutions themselves. And at the previous session, one of the teachers at the end had asked me, do you create examples for the students to follow first of all? My advice would be, they're the ones that then demonstrate to you their divergent thinking, allow them to come up with the ideas and see what they can explore and see what they can develop for you, okay? The other example, as I mentioned to you, would be the marshmallow challenge. And I would suggest you try that with your students and see how they get on. One thing that I would say to you is that don't be concerned or worried that using the design thinking approach and building the prototypes needs to be expensive. I run workshops, design thinking workshops all the time. And one thing is I actually used to use Lego, but I don't use it anymore. And the reason I don't use it is that, one, it is expensive, it's difficult to get hold of. And what it does is it forces people to, again, think in a particular way. And it gets them to say, they get worried if they haven't got a particular colour brick, or they get worried if they haven't got a particular figure. If you use very cheap and cheerful materials, and it literally can be anything, you can use spaghetti sticks for design thinking materials. I'm going to get used to do something in just a minute with tinfoil and pipe cleaners, okay? Because one of the things that you want to do when you're building these examples and getting the children to actually build their prototypes, you want them to be easily built and easily destructed. Because one of the principles of the design thinking is based on learning through failure. To be comfortable when we get something wrong, because if we get it wrong, but we understand how we can improve it, then we're going to achieve a better result in the end. Okay? So if we create something that's too precious and we don't want to break up, then we're creating a problem for ourselves. Okay? The pipe cleaner and foil design challenge, I'm going to get you to do this in a moment. And the example I'm going to get you to do is not linked to any specific learning outcome, i.e. it's not the gingerbread man building a bridge or creating a boat that floats, but it can be. And what I'm going to get you to do in just a moment, I'm going to give in, you can work in 2s and 3s, and the only materials you're going to have available for you to use are one piece of foil, you can break it, tear it, do whatever you want with it, and a few pipe cleaners, okay? And that's it, that's all you're going to have, okay? So can I ask you to come forward? It's probably easier if you come and collect them from the table. Just 3, 4, 5 pipe cleaners and one piece of foil, okay? Okay, So for this activity, I'm going to give you just 3 minutes, okay? And this activity is intentionally very broad, and I would suggest that in its first instance, if you want to try this with your students, you try it in its very broad context. We're going to do one round, but I'll explain to you afterwards how you would develop this. Using the material that you've got, nothing else, just the pipe cleaners and the tin foil, I want you to create something, okay? Anything you want, just create it, and you have 3 minutes to do so. Okay, very nice. Anybody like to share their masterpieces with us? What's been created?
That's my name tag.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I didn't have foil, so I just used it as this will be my name tag, like, you know, to put it on the board, and then we just write our name on it.
Perfect.
I just made I wanted to make something like this, but I didn't have anything, so I just a hairband around it.
Excellent, well done. Got a frustrated princess here, obviously. Anybody else like to share? Very nice. Lovely. Butterfly, very nice. Oh, and flower with butterfly. Perfect. Another flower as well. Lovely.
And I was trying to make a butterfly.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. We did it in the other group. We actually had one of the teachers create a DNA structure. Exactly. Wow. Wow. So with this activity, you can do it. It doesn't have to be particularly about a specific solution. It can be completely freeform. But what you would need to do is initially just let them freeform and come up with their ideas, just 3 minutes. You then stop and let them share their ideas, talk about the process they went through, why they chose, what they made and how they made it. And you get them to share their ideas and feedback with each other. What you'll see during the process as well is that, as is always the way, some children will get it immediately and they'll fully engage, some will be a bit reluctant and step back. But in doing it in two stages, once they see, and it's the same thing that happens here, once you start to see what somebody else is making, you think, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, it prompts that process. What you then need to do is do a second round, again just for 3 minutes, and you ask them to improve on what they made the first time, okay? And 2 things will happen there. One, often the children and the adults are quite reluctant to get rid of what they've just created because we get a lot of ownership of things that we've just crafted. But it's an important part of the process because they need to understand the ability to actually improve on something that's been made, and to improve on something that's been made by getting constructive feedback from the other students and from yourself. Let them go through the next 3 minutes building the improved model, and then do the same process in terms of getting feedback on what they've learned through that process as well, okay? Now, just using the tinfoil and pipe cleaners, you could do the gingerbread man story. It can be any simple materials that you want. I've got a trolley that I whirl around when I do my design thinking workshops, and in that I have plastic straws. I have paper cups, paper plates, bits of paper. It can be scrap paper, it can be anything. In the pipe cleaner packages, as I took them out, I found these. I hold on to these because I'll use these again and they'll go back into my design thinking kit, okay? So it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be really cheap and cheerful, easy solutions. And what you'll be amazed is what can be created and what the children will create using the most basic materials. It can be as simple as 2 items. You can also do more complex. I've run design thinking sessions to develop solutions for water carriers, non-electric solutions for keeping babies warm using 3 materials. A piece of string, a piece of paper and something to fasten it, okay? And you'll be amazed what can be produced with very, very simple materials, okay? The design thinking approach can be applied literally to anything. There's another workshop for you here, which is design thinking challenges for kids. And the examples, I don't know if you can see, but it's literally creating something tall, something alive, something that can be carried, something funny. Initially, you'll ask them just to start sketching and developing their ideas, sharing the ideas, and then the absolute critical part, and it's not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination, is that they build the idea that they've created. And it's that building process which engages the thinking process in a completely different way. Once they build it, they can test it, and then it's about improving on the solution that they've come up with. Okay? So those are just a few examples for you. I'm sure collectively and individually you can come up with 101 different ways of applying the same principles. And what it really does is it allows the students to take control of their own learning. So it actually is much more student-centred rather than teacher-centred. And back to that question I was asked earlier, should I build the example and get them to, show them? For me, the answer is no. Yeah? Allow them to develop the solutions that they can come up with and allow them to learn through the process. Okay? So that's all we have time for. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. But other than that, just thank you for your time and attention, and I hope you've enjoyed the day.